Sean.
Joe Tacopina, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. All right, let's bring in the author of the brand new book, Get Trump, Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, and the author of the upcoming book, Trial of the Century, Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett. Get Trump. Looks like Alvin Bragg kept his promise, Professor.
Well, but he got him in the room. He indicted him in Florida. Thus proof that he could have indicted him any day over the last 7 years, and that they deliberately violated the statute of limitations because no previous prosecutor would go after him. The very fact that the indictment came down when he was out of state proves that they could have indicted him any time before the indictment came down. So there's that problem. Also, when you're a Democratic elected prosecutor who ran on the campaign pledge of getting Trump, and you're going to indict, forget about the former president, the man who may become the future president, if he beats the incumbent who is the head of your political party, prosecutor, you better have the strongest case imaginable, not a case that depends on stitching together two inapplicable statutes and using Michael Cohen. Let me tell you something about Michael Cohen. He's not through with his problems. He just tweeted about me saying, because I had attacked his credibility, that I was involved with underage girls on Epstein's island. I'm about to sue him now for defamation. As you know, the woman who falsely accused me acknowledged that she may have made a mistake in misidentifying me. And I would normally not sue somebody for writing that kind of nonsense. But this is Michael Cohen, who's about to try to prevent Donald Trump from running for president of the United States. And I'm going to sue him for defamation, not let him get away with that. And when I sue him, I will be able to prove his repeated lies because he can't refuse to testify in a civil case. So his problems are just beginning. I'm going to make it a little easier for Joe Tacopina to cross-examine him. Although, as I've said before, any first-year student could win this case if the name wasn't Donald Trump and if it wasn't in Manhattan. This case has to get out of Manhattan. Will it get out of Manhattan? We don't know. In 60 years of practice,
Professor, would you recommend a change in venue attempt? Professor, would you attempt to get a change in venue?
Of course. I would try to move it to Staten Island or to some upstate venue. But can you imagine a judge or a juror coming home to their wife and family and friends and saying, I'm the man, I'm the woman who let Donald Trump off? Nobody would ever speak to them again. What happened to me on Martha's Vineyard would be nothing compared. That would happen to a judge or a juror who was held responsible for allowing, according to Manhattanites, the most dangerous man in America to go free and run for president. So there's no possibility he can get a fair trial in Manhattan.
I agree with that point. Let me go to Gregg Jarrett. Gregg, you've been following this closely. Let's get your general thoughts on all of it.
Well, Joe Tacopina said he's going to humiliate Alvin Bragg. I think Alvin Bragg has already humiliated himself all on his own. You know, this is a totally bizarre, convoluted legal theory that Alvin Bragg has simply dreamed up. You know, taking a misdemeanor and supercharging it into a felony. The law doesn't support that, and I would predict that Tacopina and his co-counsel will immediately file a motion to dismiss because the law doesn't support the charge, and the alleged facts don't support a crime recognized by the law. You know, beyond the statute of limitations, which expired 2 years ago, you've got other serious obstacles. Bragg would have to prove that Trump was personally involved in falsifying records. And then he'd have to prove that Trump understood these complex campaign finance laws that nobody can comprehend and then intended to violate those laws. Non-disclosure agreements in exchange for money are perfectly legal. And the Federal Election Commission looked at this and they said it's not a crime. Even if it's not personal or a commercial reason behind it, it's still not a campaign donation. So this is a case that I think is quite clearly, and even Democrats say they recognize it, politically motivated. This is a DA who has disgracefully abused his power and decided to criminalize politics, and it is a serious breach of his ethical duty to see that justice is done fairly and equitably. In this case, it is not.
Let me ask you both a final question. Same question for both. Professor, you can go first. There are reports that there are 34 counts. How do you get to 34 counts when you consider the people that we know went before the grand jury? Lastly, David Pecker, who used to run the National Enquirer. We know Bob Costello was there 2 Mondays ago. How do you get to that number?
If you have one large salami and a sharp knife, you can cut it into as many pieces as you want. And any creative prosecutor can make 34 crimes out of a single incident if he wants to be creative about it. But, you know, there'll be motions, of course, to dismiss many of the counts. Thomas Jefferson once said that for a criminal statute to be constitutional, a reasonable person has to be able to understand it if he reads it while running. Now, I'm sitting. I've been doing this 60 years. I haven't seen the indictment. Maybe they'll find massive evidence that nobody knows about now. But at this point in time, I have to tell you, this is an example of, as I wrote in my book, get Trump. This is get Trump. I promise I'll get Trump, and I will not win re-election unless I do get Trump. So now let's rummage through the statute books, find something. They rummaged, they found nothing, and now they indicted for nothing. This is a very sad day for justice in America. This coming from liberal.
We're losing Professor. Gregg, remember, this was the zombie case, as they called it. Quickly, we have about 30 seconds. Tell me, how do you get to 34 counts?
Well, I think as Joe suggested, you take each one of the reimbursement payments over a long period of time and you count that as a crime, which is utterly absurd. I can't figure out how Bragg can even bring a felony. It was a federal election, so he can't charge a state campaign finance crime, and he can't charge a felony campaign finance crime because he's a local prosecutor and only charge under state law. So, as I say, this will be an immediate motion to dismiss, and if we have a fair, neutral, objective judge, the case will be dismissed before it ever goes to a jury. But in New York, mostly liberal judges. So if the judge denies the motion, then Trump files an interlocutory appeal to a higher court to get the case knocked out, and it should be.
All right, Gregg, Jarrett, and Alan Dershowitz, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. All right, joining us now with more reaction, he is the executive vice president of the Trump Organization, Eric Trump.